Relevant to our interests is sponsored by Deerfest, because fuck the Watery Commerce Board and their Moose Fest horseshit. Do they even have moose? No, they're lying to the masses. Have you ever seen a moose? They aren't real. They're like jackalopes or libertarian hairdressers. Fuck Watery and fuck their mooses. Brought to you by the former head of the Bright Falls Tourist Action Committee. Oh yeah, no, totally unlawful the way I was kicked out. Oh, you show up drunk and without pants once, just once there. Music.
All right, and welcome to Relevant to Our Interests.
We're high energy
Frank,
today.
and we are. Maybe it's the coffee in the morning time. I'm Frank,
fuck
with me as always.
Or Moose
With me
Fest.
as always
Just fuck
is-
all of them. Fuck everything.
with John.
Fuck Watery.
With me as always is John. He's not going to introduce himself.
Nope.
I guess I have to. You son of a bitch.
I never introduce myself. It's the one thing that I've decided to keep from the old podcast.
That's fair. Well, you kind of do. Sometimes you're like, I don't know, maybe John or, whatever.
It could be.
Anyway,
Could be.
welcome to the show. We're a podcast that talks about the nerd shit that interests us.
Yeah.
And today we're talking about Alan Wake, but we want to
not the
start
new
each
one.
episode.
The old
Not the new one. Alan Wake Remastered, technically.
Yes.
Not the new one. But before we do that, we always like to do a little. We like to do a little catch up, some stuff that's interesting. Sometimes it could be a news item or something in the world of nerd or geek or weird news. Sometimes it can be personal, and today it's both. It's personal for me and both personal and weird, or not weird, nerdy for John.
Accurate.
I guess mine's technically nerdy. So hey, I have, and John knows this, but I'm telling him because he's my co-host. I have a
I'll
new
pretend that
family
I don't
member
know.
here.
What? You have a new family member. How the hell
I
does
have a
that
new family
work?
member. So a new puppy. I do not know what
puppy.
he is. I do not know what he is. He's a mutt, presumably. My nephew and I found him about 1.5 miles from the road. My nephew was up helping me with some house stuff, and we were going into town. I live out in the country. We're going into town to grab some stuff for the job, and this little thing runs in front of us, and we stop, and it's a puppy. So we take it to the animal shelter because just in case someone has lost it. It's what I would want if one of my dogs was picked up. I've lost dogs before, so it's the responsible thing to do. They took it in, and I indicated that if nobody wanted him, I would like him. And he was on his stray hold, and after his stray hold was up, I went and picked him up. I've named him Monkey D. Luffy, yes, after the character from the manga anime live-action series, One Piece.
I still need to watch the live action one, but
I
then
think
I'd
you'd
have
like
to-
the live-action one.
I'm absolutely certain I would like the live action one. It's just I would then have to have a conversation with somebody.
with people that
Yeah.
are obsessed with the anime,
Yeah.
and that's fair.
Yeah.
Though, I'm not pushing for this, but if you watch the live action one and you feel strongly about it one way or the other, I want to talk about it on the podcast just because I fucking loved it, and I had a lot of fun watching it.
Okay, then let's just plan that being like our next thing there, because it wouldn't be difficult for me to.
But
it's what, 6
okay.
episodes?
8.
8
episodes.
Ooh, 8 episodes.
Oh.
That's the deal breaker right there. The
Yeah.
2 additional 45-minute chunks of time.
Well,
That's
technically,
what's
they're
gonna
about an
stop me.
hour. They're about an hour. Well, that'll give me a chance to rewatch it too. So, do a complete rewatch. So anyway, yeah. So I guess that's what we're doing for our next episode. But anyway, yeah. So I'll actually post a picture of him. I've posted on my personal social media accounts.
I will
but
say,
I'll post on the. I'm going to post him on the podcast account. And
I will say he's a very photogenic little shit.
he is just a cute little guy, and he's He was super timid when we first brought him. He's super timid. Of course, he'd been out, I don't know, 2 or 3 days at least. He's super skinny. He's starting to plump up a little bit. He's not fat, but he's you can't see his bones and joints as well as you could when we found him.
Which in and of itself is a pretty good thing.
Yeah, he's filling out, and he's getting to the point now where he'll run around the yard a little bit and torment his elderly brothers. And so
I do have one slight bit of general advice for our listeners.
Yes.
Joints and bones and like ligaments and the like should probably not be visible. That's usually a bad sign.
That's not good. It's usually bad.
No.
Yeah. Especially if it's like if the bone is literally poking out of your skin. That's definitively terrible.
I mean, unless you're like a necromorph or a skeleton in a meat suit trying to pass off as a human being.
But
those are really the only allowable exceptions.
It's true.
Ultimately be praised.
So that's my interesting catching up thing. John, what do you got going on? I actually know you got yours too, so I don't know if I should act surprised or not.
Being the audience surrogate. You'd be surprised.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
I'm going to do a spit take.
I have, even though I've been working on it for years and years and years and years, have a tabletop role-playing game that I have created, like a rule set for sort of a generalized rule set. I'm working on setting up some with some specific sort of game worlds, but yeah, I have a rule set. I have a little beta adventure, and if anyone listening is interested in being one of the little being a beta tester on that first little adventure, you can email the podcast or the email address that I use for this stuff, which is JRB Primordial, which is PRIMORDIAL @gmail. For you can email me there. That's all specifically for this stuff. But
yeah, and if anyone's interested, you can also email the podcast. You can email John. The podcast email is relevant to our interests @gmail.com. It's spelled just like the new logo. So, but I'm sure John would be happy to either get you the information to run it.
Yeah.
If it's someone he knows and likes, or if it's someone he thinks is cool. Like I suspect, like if a famous actor that you thought was cool, who's a nerd, like emailed you and said, "Hey, will you run me in this game?" You'd probably be willing to.
Oh yeah, without question there. My general thing with this is that I have some organizational difficulties with like getting people together for it, but I will run the game for anyone as long as I don't have to find all the players and schedule the time. Like if I don't have to do the like what I always call the stage manager stuff. If I don't have to do the stage manager stuff, then I'm absolutely fine with running the game whenever, however. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and when you're to a point where you were willing to share it with more widely with the public at large in a broader scope, because you're still doing testing and refining stuff, I from my understanding.
Yeah.
Then we will actually maybe share it to the podcast page, various social media sites.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. I haven't played the newest refined version, but John ran me through kind of an adventure like a year ago about
give or take,
a little over a year ago. But it was a lot of fun. I had a really good time with it. But yeah, it's a cool little system. It's It leans more on the narrative end than the gamey end or the simulation end.
Yeah, it's definitely more narrativist than gamist or simulationist.
But
I think I mostly just got really tired of really tired of particularly simulationist games, and 5e is pretty good about not being overly simulationist. It's kind of really more
very gamey.
Yeah, it is very gamist. But so I don't like the feeling of being sort of more limited that comes with, something like 5e. And then, but then on top of that, like the stuff that's like the simulationist where, like your GURPS sort of like you can do anything in here as long as you're willing to do 15 hours of algebra. You can do anything in this system. And yes, I'm being unfair to GURPS. GURPS deserves to be unfair too. Fuck GURPS.
I don't think it's that bad. But anyway, we should be moving on.
Well, you're wrong, Frank. That's fine. This is America, where you are entitled to be wrong.
It is. That's fair. Anyway, so up next, Alan Wake Remastered. All right, Alan Wake Remastered. We are still in the process of planning stuff out for this podcast. We don't have we have kind of a set schedule for recording, but we haven't set a whole bunch of stuff in stone as far as what we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, there's a bunch of other shit that's sort of up in the air, but it kind of always was. So it's just sort of it's the new podcast is kind of like the old podcast.
It is, but I would say we are a little more organized than the old one.
You know what? I'll give you that.
At least in some ways, anyway.
Well, I mean, I know I know that I'm in a place where I can contribute more to organizational stuff. Not a lot, because I mean I'm still who I am as a person. But
well, and I am in a better place mentally with my job and stuff than I was forever. And so anyway, we had no plans to necessarily to do Alan Wake Remastered, other than I decided a couple days before Halloween that I wanted to play kind of a horror themed video game, and I didn't want to mess with my Xbox to play The Evil Within, because I wanted to play it in the privacy of my room downstairs.
We had to do those ones.
They actually would be fun. I was thinking about it.
Yeah,
I happen to have
the first one's weird. The second one I actually really liked. The second one I really like.
But I happen to have Alan Wake Remastered from PlayStation. They gave it away as one of their free games months ago, back in April or May, and I was like, I'll just play Alan Wake because I kept hearing that this game is cool, and so that's what we did. So that's what we're talking about today. Alan Wake Remastered. It's a remastered version of Alan Wake. It's made by the studio Remedy Entertainment. Which is a Finnish studio. It was founded in 1995 by the different demo scene developers.
Yeah.
And I got a comment about that.
Okay.
Demo scenes, for those who don't know, because I didn't know, there are just a bunch of programmers and musicians and artists who made little demos of their shit, like programs, visual art, themes, visual skills.
So one could argue that it is a scene for demos.
It is, but I haven't looked into it too much. That's the only thing you folks are going to get. If anybody knows more about the demo scenes, especially in the 90s,
that actually would be. Yeah, that actually might be an interesting little deep dive.
Yeah, it actually would, because if they are responsible for some of the stuff, I think they are. There's some interesting background in some of the websites and stuff I used to go to back in the day. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Remedy Entertainment. I did not realize they were a Finnish studio.
Oh yeah, they're hella Finnish. If you see any interviews with the actual designers and the people who run the company, they have pretty intense Finnish accents.
Yeah. Which is cool. And I didn't realize that. But it's really cool. Like they're one of the. It's just like what's that studio that does EVE Online for that's set in Iceland?
Oh yeah. I don't remember, but yeah, I was just listening to I think one of my YouTube people. I think Down the Rabbit Hole just did it was like a 5-hour
Yeah, they
video
I haven't
documentary
watched it because...
on Eve. I think I turned it on like shortly before bed one night, and I think I woke up. I woke up in the middle of the night and it was still going.
Yeah. So anyway, the first game that they developed was a racing game for DOS called Death Rally.
I mean, I didn't get to do my thing because you just
go ahead and do your thing.
Bowled over it. Oh yeah. So it's Finnish. It's a very Finnish studio, and they are and like. The Finns, people of Finland, are so fucking proud of it. Like, if you were to wander around in one of the cities there, which I can't remember any of the names of any of them, and sort of like
Helsinki.
Helsinki. If you wander Helsinki and just sort of like casually mentioned Alan Wake or Remedy or there, you'd suddenly get a bunch of people going like, yeah, that's us. Yeah, we did that. Yeah. I know this because my dear friend Anina grew up in Finland. She's Finnish. Like, I mean, she looks like she's straight out of the Hitler Youth. She's so Finnish.
That's kind of mean. I mean,
not really. She's the one that explains to me that that a lot of the people the Nazis grabbed to show as their like perfect Aryans or whatnot were actually just Finns. Huh. Just Finnish people. Yeah, wow. It's a whole weird thing. But she's very Finnish, is really what I'm saying. She's very Finnish.
But one of these days you'll have her on.
Yeah.
You talk.
She does a lot of stuff. I'm actually currently like you can't see it because
Finnish are cool folks.
This is an audio podcast thing. But I'm actually currently wearing a shirt for a Let's Play or an actual play D&D thing that she's in. It's actually pretty good.
Yeah,
it's actually really good. It's called Bardic Quest, and we'll leave that as the
teaser.
Not there yet,
or the shout out.
Yeah, it'll be the shout out. There's the shout out.
Yeah. Okay, but anyway, so Remedy's first game was Death Rally. It was a racing game for DOS. The next game they developed was Max Payne, which was on the PlayStation 2, and they also developed Max Payne 2. And both of those games were written by a man named Sami Antero Jari, who I'm sure I'm slaughtering his Finnish name. He's known by Sam Lake. That's his sort of his
nom de plume.
And he was a writer that they pulled in to work on the script for Death Rally, and he wrote the story and whatnot for Max Payne. He also lent his face for the character Max Payne. So if you play that original PlayStation 2 game, that's his face. And fun fact, in Alan Wake, there's that scene towards the end of the game where he's in his apartment, and he's got to turn the TV on, and there's that interview going on with him talking to the guy about his last book, and his wife's pissed because of the drinking. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
Well, if you watch the whole interview, the other guy that's there is Sam Lake. And when they say, do the face, that he's doing the Max Payne face. But
that's
anyway,
awesome.
So Sam Lake wrote the story of Alan Wake, and he's also a creative director. And Alan Wake is, first off, there's a lot of interesting little bits. John actually discovered he has like the special edition for the game, the original 360 version of it.
Yeah. Has a bonus disc that I can't remember what's on it because my Xbox isn't currently hooked up because I moved, and that's a whole thing. But I have found that there's apparently a little like book. It's like an actual honest to God book, and it looks like it's the Alan Wake Files. It's an in-universe book about this guy following after what happens with Alan Wake.
I'd really like to look at that eventually.
Yeah, I know.
So when you come out for a visit,
Hey, look, here.
I get out there for a visit.
Here, you can look at it. See?
Yeah.
You can see it.
So anyway, the story itself is very influenced by things like Stephen King, David Lynch, Twin Peaks specifically. There's a lot of psychological thrillers and horror stories it kind of gives nods to.
Yeah.
There's a very heavy influence from the Twilight Zone, especially with the spin-off.
Well, I would almost say that the Twilight Zone is basically the framing device.
Yeah. I mean, there's an actual TV, like little TV series, like if you stop and watch the televisions throughout the game.
Yeah.
There's called Night Springs. That's a complete knockoff of.
I think there's even an achievement.
Twilight Zone.
There's even an achievement for finding all of the.
Yeah, there is
TVs, and some of them are really hard to find. Some of them are hard to find.
Yeah, I found most of them. I think I'm missing 2 or 3, but anyway.
Yeah.
The game's plot actually kind of reflects the development history of the game itself in some ways, because initially what they wanted to do is they wanted to create an open world game after Max Payne, because Max Payne has very structured levels to kind of give the story out.
I actually see that more and more, and I honestly, this is a little bit of a jump ahead, but I honestly wish they'd been able to do the open world thing. I think some of my ultimate critiques would have been lessened at least a little bit if it'd been more open world.
Yeah, well, and we'll get to that.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Yeah. I'm just
the thing is they knew they didn't want to go back to. Well, they couldn't go back to Max Payne. They don't have the rights to it. Rockstar Studios owns the right to Max Payne, which is why Remedy had no involvement for Max Payne 3. But they were kind of floundering with it, and they ended up refocusing because some of the stuff they wanted to do with it they couldn't achieve with the open world thing.
That makes sense.
Once they refocused it, things kind of clicked together, and it kind of, I mean, Alan Wake kind of mirrors that, except what refocuses his ability to write is we'll talk about in the plot.
Yeah,
it's not good, but it was originally released exclusively on the 360. There was no originally there was no plans to port it over to PC, and there was nothing. I think they had an exclusivity right with Microsoft, obviously, so it could only be on the 360. They did get the rights back, and so they were able to port it to the PC a couple years after its original release in 2010. And then they did release the remastered version in October of 2021. So it's been out for 2 years now. It includes both the 2 special episode DLCs. They were able to basically release that completely wide open. There is a sequel that just came out literally like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and then there's.
It's just to say, and it's very strongly that they're designing an intertwined universe.
Yeah.
The Remedy folks.
And there's also Control, which has become one of my absolute favorite games. Like I fucking love that game. And we will eventually talk about that one because John wants to. Fun fact, the one who told you about that, and then I never finished the game. I ended up only playing 5 or 6 hours
played
of
it there. It's sort of just a quick little hit there. It's sort of a more focused. If you're at all familiar with the whole SCP thing, it's sort of a more focused version of that, frankly, story-wise.
Yeah. And when we talk about the game, we'll dive more into that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Alan Wake's been out for 13 years now. I mean, it's for quite a long time. It's a pretty spectacular game plot-wise, which we're going to go over.
The story, I have absolutely no critiques, no issues with. And for those who listen to the old podcast, people would know that I am a petty, persnickety, angry motherfucker when it comes to some of this shit.
Yeah, it's true. So anyway, we're going to go over the plot. I wrote pretty detailed synopsis. from here on out, spoilers just all the way through. So if you haven't played the game but you're interested in playing it, go play it before you listen to the rest of this episode, because we're just gonna spoil the fuck out of this.
In fact, I would say that we should just take that. We should have said that in the last podcast, because that's just how our podcast works. Like from here on out, there are spoilers. Like if we are talking about it, we are going to spoil it.
I will say this: I don't feel as bad with Psycho Gorman talking about it.
The plot honestly is not the important part of that one.
Yeah, it's not.
All.
It's the
plot. The plot really doesn't. The plot is like pulled out of it's pulled out of the freezer section of the grocery store level basic.
Yeah. But anyway, so the plot of Alan Wake, first off, it's presented like a television series. Like if you're sitting down to watch a TV show, only you have to play through big chunks of it.
Yeah.
It includes episode recaps. There's actually a closing song. It doesn't do the closing credits between an episode, but it just says end of episode 1, and there's actually like a song, like a lot of TV series, and particularly in the early 2010s would do.
Yeah. And I found out that there's basically, I think there was seems to be a different song for the end of each episode.
There is.
And also I found out that if you leave it and walk away, it will autoplay the next chapter if you let the song play through to the end. It does. Yeah. That was a fun thing to learn. Like, oh, I'm like 2 minutes into a cutscene. Well, son of a bitch.
Fun fact is, you can go back and watch all the cutscenes from the.
Yeah, well, I think it was one that was like one of those like people talking, but it's gameplay, but it should be a cutscene. That one of those sorts of things.
Yeah, it does. It does previously on Alan Wake. Yeah. So I discovered that because I actually sat through. I was like, oh, this is cool. The first episode, I just sat through it, and then it clicked in. It was like previously on Alan Wake, and I was like. That's when I completely clued in, because when it hit that end of episode 1, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And then when it went into that previously on Alan Wake, I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. I love the way this is presented. So episode 1 starts out with a tutorial. There's Alan's basically narrating. He's having this nightmare where he hits this hitchhiker, he kills him, and then he stops to like help him, and his car won't start, and then the shadowy version of the hitchhiker chases him to this lighthouse. And when he gets to the lighthouse, he gets to the top, he wakes up, he's on this ferry going to Bright Falls with his wife. I
will say that was one of the better and smoother tutorial setups that I've seen in a game in a while, because it goes over basically you go over all the basics of the gameplay right there, but it didn't feel like heavy-handed. I mean, it still felt like a tutorial, particularly the second time through. But
it's not.
But also, like it hints there. Like there's some. It
gives you everything you need. It gives you everything you need to play the game right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Without making you feel like an idiot, like some games do with their tutorials, and without keeping too much information back, so you can't.
Yeah,
there's a problem with some tutorials where when you get to them, they don't give you the information you need, or it's obtuse, and it's not effective.
Well, and I also think the fact that you had the voice in the light. That that ultimately you learn is the dude, but that particular character keeps coming back and doing the same thing. So it's not just like, you don't feel like it's just, oh, this is just a one-off tutorial.
Yeah, it's a beat that happens throughout the game. Like it's it's not just. I mean, he comes back several times, but it's not just tutorial sections.
Yeah,
he does come back.
And he's
whenever he introduces something else.
He's an important part of the game, and more than just like this is the guy that tells you to do the tutorial. Yeah, it's not just the narrator that exists for one scene, which I think is one of my that has that has started to really, really annoy me. Like, if you're going to have some kind of like narrator sort of character, just own it. Go for it. There's a lot of very compelling, interesting things you can do with a narrator. Because a narrator innately creates a bunch of questions that now you get the opportunity to answer.
Yeah. And so this whole sequence seems to be a reference to I Know What You Did Last Summer. If you haven't seen that horror movie.
I haven't.
Yeah, they hit a hitchhiker and they get out to like check him out.
Yeah.
The difference is the hitchhiker doesn't disappear necessarily. They try to hide the body, and then it turns out he's not dead. Anyway,
I think you just explained why I haven't seen that particular movie.
So Alan wakes up. He's with his wife on a ferry going to the town of Bright Falls. She's taking them there, with the hopes that he can meet with the psychologist, Dr. Hartman, to kind of overcome his writer's block. They stop to get the keys to the cabin they're staying in from a guy named Stucky. But instead of actually getting the keys from Stucky, this old woman shows up, gives them the keys, tells them they're from Stucky. And then they go to the cabin, and night falls. It's twilight. Alice, Alan's wife, kind of reveals her intention with the trip.
Yeah.
He kind of flies into a rage and leaves, and he hears. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to say that like the intensity with which he does it is really shitty, but but kind of being lied to about the nature of the trip and it sort of being this sort of like trick into getting him into writing again. Like I think. It's like he shouldn't have been so shitty about it, but I think Alan's feelings there are actually kind of valid. Like his anger there is definitely valid.
I kind of agree. There was a certain amount of justification for his anger, but maybe not his response.
No. His response is completely inappropriate, but his but I think in that moment particularly his feelings are very valid.
Sorry, I had to give a dog a pet.
I also it looked like I'd been clipping again, so it's because I'm actually paying attention to it, so I bumped it down another little bit.
Okay, cool.
So try and keep an eye on that.
So he hears some screaming from the cabin. He goes out to the bridge. Because the cabin itself's on this little island.
There is one factoid that needs to be known in order to like make the screaming and everything kind of make more sense. Alice has a crippling fear of the dark. Like, yes, it is a cat. Like she should be on some antipsychotics or something. Like she needs some. That's the level of anxiety that she has for that is. Particularly something that common is concerning.
Yes. So very concerning, actually. So the lights go out. The generators shut off at the cabin. Alice starts screaming. Alan runs towards the cabin. When he gets there, the lights are out, and it appears that Alice has fallen off the back of the back porch into the water.
Yep.
He dives in after her, goes unconscious. Wakes up in his car. He's just careened off the road and been in an accident. And the only thing he can think of is, where the hell is Alice? What happened? Why am I in my car? The only thing last thing he remembers is diving into the water after her. He sees a gas station up ahead. He goes to the gas station, discovers once he arrives there, and then he gets to a point, and these are kind of gameplay, that the guy who's supposed to get the key from, he also works at the lumber mill or does some stuff at the lumber mill.
Yeah.
And the shade, him and various shades of people that work at the lumber mill chase Alan through the forest. And that's a common theme, and we don't need to go into a lot of details over it unless it's relevant to the plot.
At least right now. I have some thoughts on that from a gameplay perspective, but like story-wise,
we will talk about that.
Yeah, story-wise, there's just shades. They just happen
Shades
there.
and birds and
like
stuff.
the darkness, the darkness from the dark place.
The Taken.
Just sort of takes people.
Yeah. But he gets to the gas station, discovers that an entire week has passed since they've arrived in Bright Falls. He calls the sheriff to report his wife missing and says, hey, we were staying at the cabin on Bird Lake Island in Cauldron Lake. And she's like, the cabin's gone. That island hasn't existed since the 70s, since a small volcanic eruption happened.
Yeah,
and he's like,
bullshit.
the
island,
we were there.
Yeah.
So she shows up and takes him to the island and the place and shows him like, no, it's gone. It's not there. That's the end of episode 1. That's how the first episode ends. Fantastic ending, by the way.
Oh yeah.
Great cliffhanger. Episode 2 opens up with the town doctor checking Alan out. He gets a phone call. He basically tells the doctor he's fine, kind of lies to him. That way, because he feels like he can continue looking for his wife. He gets a phone call from a man named Mott, who claims to be Alice's kidnapper. Shortly after that, Dr. Hartman shows up and introduces him to Alan, and Alan punches him because the dude's an asshole, and you get that right.
Yeah,
right off the bat.
At best, he's sort of a slimy prick.
Yeah. And shortly after that, Alan Wake's agent Barry shows up and basically grabs Alan and takes him. They go get a cabin. Alan tells Barry that Mott wants to meet him at the top of this lookout at this national park. And so at night, Alan goes up there and meets with Mott. They're assailed by a bunch of the Taken. And they end up having a fight. The man's like, you got to bring me the manuscript that you've been working on. And the entire time I was like, I don't understand what you mean, other than he keeps getting, by the figure in light that first appeared in the lighthouse, he keeps getting these manuscript pages sort of placed. And they actually reveal huge chunks of the story if you read through them. That either happened,
like where
or is off screen, or happened later,
or is like there are times where you'll see like wait, I read this in the thing, I
read this 2 episodes ago.
Yeah,
it's pretty fantastic. They get into an argument. Mott runs off, and then Alan returns back to the cabin to rescue Barry, who's being attacked by flocks of birds. And Barry is a firm believer now at this point. Like, Alan's not full of shit. There's actually stuff happening.
I can't remember exactly how Barry words it, but the way Barry words it is just sort of like dude, you know what? I don't have to understand any of this shit to take you seriously. Like, I'm taking you seriously. I don't give a shit if you're crazy. I don't if you are crazy or not, doesn't matter. You're accurate. So we're just gonna roll with this.
Yeah. They then get a phone call from the waitress in the cafe that Alan stopped to get the keys from. She tells him that, hey, I've got a bunch of your manuscript pages. You can come down and pick them up. She's being controlled by the mysterious old woman. Yeah. And that reveal is how episode 2 ends. Episode 3 starts with them going to pick up the manuscript pages. She's clearly being controlled. Like, I don't understand how Barry and Alan couldn't be suspicious of her the way she's responding to him. She ends up drugging them. They end up waking up, and the trailer park she lives in is under siege with the sheriff's department, Sheriff Breaker, and this FBI agent Nightingale. He starts shooting at him. Alan escapes, slips through, ends up going to the local radio station because he keeps hearing this radio program, thinks the guy might be sympathetic to him. The cops catch up with him at the radio station, so he slips through and kind of escapes, goes out, and the next morning he goes and he makes his way to the coal mine that he's supposed to meet Mott at. And when Mott actually calls him and changes the location. Where he wants to meet.
Last minute.
last minute, and it really pisses Wake off.
Yeah.
But he goes to meet Ma, and it's near the location of the actual island, where the island was. When he arrives, he sees the mysterious old woman sort of torturing Mott, and then this tornado like appears and hurls both of them away and causes Alan to be thrown into the water. And that's how episode 3 ends. Episode 4, which is both my least favorite and favorite episode of the game.
Yeah.
And I can explain why.
Oh.
Alan wakes up at the lodge that Dr. Hartman runs.
Oh, Hartman.
Dr. Hartman runs this lodge to treat people who are creatives, who are artists or musicians or game developers.
Yeah.
He begrudgingly allows the game developer guy to be there.
God, Hartman's such a piece of shit.
Yeah, he's encouraging them to like create. This is like part of his therapy.
But
he's actually being
what
influenced.
What ultimately happens to him?
Yeah, I know he shows up in control.
He shows up in control, and I can say pretty definitively, he does not deserve what ultimately happens to him, even though he is a complete piece of shit.
No, that's fair. But he is being influenced by the dark presence.
Yeah, well, he's actually trying to use the power of the dark presence in order for money and shit.
Yeah, because the dark presence influences artists. Part of its theme is it's trying to, and we'll get into this because this is kind of the episode where a lot of this is revealed. It's trying to use its influence. It's trying to influence artists and stuff to basically bring it into our reality. Yeah,
because it like before it just sort of was there. It was kind of there were a lot of like controls from the indigenous populations had like knew it was like, this is a bad spot, we just don't go there. Fuck that place. Or they had or there were like rituals involved with it specifically, but then it dealt with Zane is basically the one who started waking it up, and then I don't know. I'm just okay.
Yeah, we're jumping a little bit ahead. Thomas Zane, he's referenced several times before this point. He was a writer.
The reason I'm bringing it up there is not necessarily from like a plot, a pure plot perspective, but like from what actually happens with the lake, because the lake definitively evolves, but it's rested for like hundreds of years, just sort of relying on this. Like, you know, occasionally you would have one of the indigenous tribes would have some kind of mild interaction with it, or they'd, you know, like try and use it to gain some kind of some magical edge when hunting or something along those lines. And then they do, but then Thomas Zane shows up, and he's this poet, and he is actively there sitting on the lake. It starts to reach out to him, and he basically realizes that he can start changing things. And then I won't go exactly. I will because it's important to the plot later. I won't go into what he does, but he does some shit that goes poorly. And then then there's the old gods of or new gods of Asgard.
Old gods of Asgard.
Yeah, old gods of Asgard.
So he actually
are my favorite characters. They make me
so
happy.
Alan actually meets these two brothers, the Anderson brothers, Thor and Odin. And he meets them in the diner at the very beginning of the game. Yeah. But they're actually being treated at Hartman's Lodge. And he finds out from them that they have the secret of what's going on. It's at their farm. Yeah. They were like a glam metal band from the 70s, and they settled there. Yeah. And they settled in Bright Falls and built this farm, and then they just went nuts because of the influence of the dark presence.
Well, apparently, like there's stories that they sort of tell. I don't remember if it's in manuscript pages or if they themselves just tell them.
There's both.
Yeah, a mix of both there, but that like Odin had literally torn his eye out. Like at one point, like when he was drunk on this moonshine they make with the cauldron lake water. And then Thor would run around when you meet them in Hartman's deal, Thor just has this little squeaky hammer he just keeps hitting things with, and then he's just pissed off because they took his real hammer, and it makes me so happy because he's just got this like squeaky squeak whoop 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 whoop.
And so after Alan meets with the various characters, he discovers that one, Hartman's been lying to him because Hartman's saying it's all in his head. Everything he's been experiencing is hallucinations, and two, Hartman's actually locked Barry up.
Oh yeah. Oh, God, Hartman.
And so Alan lets Barry out, and then there's a storm coming, and when the storm hits, the Dark Presence shows up.
Yeah, I think it blows out the power.
It blows out the power.
Yeah.
Thor's actually able to get an actual hammer, and he hits the head nurse on the head.
Oh God, yeah, and then they're hunting they've been hunting the nurse, and yeah. Yeah, but there's a bit where they're like, he's standing outside the door and they're like, let us in. Let us in.
So yeah, this provides a distraction, allowing Alan and Barry to get away from the lodge.
Yeah.
And they head towards the farm. They get into a car accident. That's a big theme in this game is car accidents.
There's a lot of car accidents there. I think it's got to be some kind of like... Although you look at like some of the stories that they're talking about, like the ones that Alan wrote and the ones that sort of show up a lot in like, your kind of Twilight Zone things, like car accidents are a very common trope in that kind of psychological horror. And also that the like, is it like what is and isn't real? That kind of any of those stories, like there's a lot of car accidents.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say there's something that I found. I think it might just be in the remastered or something. But there's a bit in after the lights go out where you can find it's one of those little QR codes that's on the wall, like it's a poster. And if you click it, and I did it on my phone, you get basically just like this Max Payne winking at you gif.
There's actually, I know there's a couple others. There's another QR code that you can find at the very beginning of the game.
Oh yeah,
I think it might actually be in the tutorial, and it'll take you to a video on a YouTube video if you click on it. There's QR codes throughout the game. That'll take you to little Easter eggs and shit.
I need to see about playing through one more time just to hit some of the collectibles and shit.
Yeah. But anyway, so they end up getting to the farm. Yeah. Barry ends up at the farm first. He's getting attacked. They show up there. They discover that the brothers have this massive stage built at the farm. Oh. And so this is actually a gameplay element where there's this big battle where you fight hordes of these dudes.
It is one of the most awesome and incredibly frustrating parts of the entire fucking game for me.
Yeah, it is incredibly frustrating.
God, I hate it, but I love it conceptually. Like conceptually, it gives me a mental hard-on conceptually. But then when I'm actually playing it, I'm like, God damn it! Did anyone fucking beta test this or what? Shit.
Anyway,
after
they end up making it to the house, they discover the record that the brothers had made that pressed. It has a song that refers to, and I don't remember the name of the song off the top of my head. But you got the soundtrack, so you'd be able to look it up.
Yeah, I can do that.
Or we have the internet. I guess we can just do it that way too.
Yeah. Well, I think the trouble is that right now, because of the way things are built right now, I don't have a means of ripping the CD onto my computer or anything.
But anyway,
annoying.
The track reveals as a song about Barbara Yeager, who was Thomas and Cynthia Weaver.
Yeah.
Barbara Yeager was Thomas Zane, the poet's lover.
Mm-hmm.
She ended up dying, and Thomas kind of brought her back with his writing.
He used his poetry to bring her back.
What came back was not actually her; it was the Dark Presence.
It was the Dark Presence masquerading as her.
So anyway, this episode ends by Barry and Alan drinking the moonshine, and Alan having a vision of what happened exactly that night. Yeah. So basically, the dark presence got him and Alice. It trapped Alice and trapped him in the cabin that's in the dark place, the other place, and basically forced him to write, saying, "I'll let your wife go if you write this story." As Alan was writing, he realized that what he was doing was he was giving power to the dark presence and allowing it to come into reality.
It's why it became a horror story, because that was the type of story that would give the dark presence the most power, would empower it the most.
Yeah, because Alan was not a horror writer.
No, he wrote crime thrillers and TV shows.
Yeah, and so he realized what was going on. He wrote himself out of the story. He gave himself an escape, which is what brought him up to the top side of the lake. Disoriented, he got into his car, and that's what caused the accident.
Yeah. He didn't write himself out. He wrote himself.
Well, he didn't write himself out of the story.
In fact, he wrote himself out. That was the point, that he wrote himself into the story, more firmly, and started to give himself, because he knew how horror stories worked, he could start creating hope, like these little bits of hope and things there. And also that's when, but just to go back, we were talking before, beyond what Alan does, Thomas Zane, one of the things that he did was he literally wrote himself out of existence. Like, he was a huge fucking deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Alan and Barry wake up. Well, Alan's already awake, but Alan and Barry wake up. They're in a jail cell. Episode 5 starts out this way. They're confronted by Nightingale. And I honestly wish I knew more about Nightingale.
The sheriff?
I completely missed why he was even fucking there.
Oh, the agent? Yeah, no, he just kind of comes out. He does kind of come out of nowhere.
I'd like to think he has something to do with...
Because I started in the middle of... I started this playthrough in the middle of episode 2, because I'd kind of just... I'd played one, I think, a couple of months ago. Yeah. And then just kind of meh.
I'd like to think, and maybe he shows up in Alan Wake 2. Maybe there's more about him in Alan Wake 2. I don't know. Yeah. I would like to think that he's actually from the Federal Bureau of Control, but apparently he's not referenced there either. But
no, he's not. He's not. And they're really
yeah. Anyway, so anyway, they wake up in this jail cell. They're being confronted. They're being confronted by Agent Nightingale, and then the dark entity shows up, pulls Agent Nightingale into it, and Sheriff Breaker's like, "Oh, okay, you're not crazy. This is fucking nuts." Wake's like, "We need to get to the dam, because based off the song, there's a woman named Cynthia Weaver there who knows what's going on and can help us beat this thing." And so they get to the helicopter, they fly to the dam, Alan gets separated, he falls out of the fucking helicopter, then the helicopter crashes, he ends up meeting with Cynthia, and then Barry and Sheriff Breaker catch up with them, they all go to the room of light, and this room that's just filled with light bulbs. Cynthia's been watching it since the 30s, Thomas, and that's where you find out that Zane sort of wrote himself out of existence. He wrote all of the knowledge, because he was a fairly famous poet, and they actually comment there's actually a comment earlier in the game. I think it's Barry's. He's like, you said that there's this guy Thomas Zane. He's like, I've researched the hell out of him, and I can't find anything about him. And Thomas Zane wrote himself out of existence. More so, they discover when they get to the box that Cynthia's been watching all these years, these decades. All that's in the box is a page of manuscript that Thomas Zane wrote and a clicker. And the page of manuscript is describing Alan Wake as a child getting this clicker to help him overcome his fear of the dark.
Yeah.
And so, armed with this clicker, he goes back to the lake, back to where the island was, and confronts the dark entity. He goes back down into the cabin, sits down, and it basically finishes writing the story. He writes Alice escaping.
Yeah, he finishes the last. Because it's the last page, and he talks explicitly a number of times about having to see what was written and finishing the last page.
Yeah.
Because I think that's why the Dark Presence is so after him, but why they haven't been, but one of at least a couple of reasons why the Dark Presence hasn't been actively trying to just kill him outright.
Which, saying that doesn't make sense considering the gameplay elements. But anyway, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, that's also the nature of the story. There is that he can never be safe, but Alan could never be safe because that's how those stories work. But he also couldn't die.
But the Dark Presence couldn't outright kill him.
Yeah. Which I am going to be talking about once we hit gameplay stuff. Like, I'm going to rant and rave about that. So
yes, you are. So Alan sits down. He finishes the story, and the story ends with his wife escaping. Everybody celebrating Deerfest, which is something that is looming. The entire time they're there. Deerfest is going to happen. It's a festival that happens every year.
And they have this rivalry with the town of Watery, who did Moose Fest. And the Moose Fest did incredibly well this year, so we got to do better than them because.
But Alice escapes, and Alan is trapped in the cabin in the dark place with the Dark Presence. And then the special episodes. Basically, in the special episodes, you kind of see what's going on with Alan in the dark place. I don't know what else to call it.
No, that's what it's called, just the dark place.
He's led deeper into the dark place. He has a kind of an hallucination with Barry and Thomas Wake, or not Thomas Wake. Thomas Zane is like, hey, you're going too deep. You need to come back. I've been trapped here for ages. You need to come back. Alan discovers that his psyche's been kind of split in half, and once he rejoins, he's able to sit down at the typewriter and start writing a new story, which I presume is Alan Wake 2, but I don't know because I haven't played that game.
That I can say that is it. At least part of it, is implied to be the DLC in Control, the Alan Wake themed DLC in Control.
Very nice. And probably some of it's got probably Alan Wake 2. I'm certain it is. That's kind of the way the build goes, but it's like they were kind of trying to set up Jesse to be something there. Yeah. So anyway, this game came out, and I'd heard from a few people. You had mentioned it a couple times. You'd mostly talked about it as story-wise, like, hey, the story of this game is pretty cool. At the time of its release, I didn't have a 360 back then. And by the time I got one, it wasn't on my radar.
Yeah.
But as far as the game itself, so the gameplay,
it doesn't seem to know fully if it wants to be. If it wants to be like a shooter with horror elements, or if it wants to be a horror with shooter elements.
It sort of falls in that. And I will say I kind of did a deep dive because one of the things I played it on easy. I have no shame in that. Yeah. These are not the type of games I normally play. And so I always approach them from the easiest possible way.
I think Control will be more up your alley, frankly.
Yeah. I did play Control. I actually was playing Control on, I think, normal. And I'd run into issues, but I was able to power through. That one also has
really good adjustments for
and I knew that as well.
It's not accountability, availability, accommodation,
accessibility.
Yeah, they have some really great accessibility stuff. Like I adore that game for how they did it, because there was a lot of times where I just reached the I don't want to have to play. The dying over and over again is just getting ridiculous. And I still had a sufficient challenge even when I set it to even when I just clicked the I can't die button on Control. But we're not talking about Control, so
no. So some of the gameplay elements make sense thematically, and I don't necessarily have a huge problem with them in that aspect because there's this running fatigue. You can run as Alan Wake, but you can't run very long. Now you can dodge, presumably, theoretically, you can dodge nonstop throughout the game. There's issues with it, and then John's going to rant about that. That'll be part of his rant when we get to it. But Alan Wake is a writer. He's not fat, he's not flabby, but he's not in shape. Like he clearly doesn't hit the gym very often. So it makes sense that he wouldn't be able to like sprint for, ever. There's also just kind of the visibility. Most of the game is set in the dark. It becomes sort of onerous with the flashlight. If you get into an enclosed space, it really limits your visibility.
Particularly you get the heavy duty flashlight.
I fucking love that thing.
No, yeah, I adore it. But one of the things I hated is that like the little light sensitive paint messages.
Oh yeah,
like they're like completely washed out. If you're like you have to watch it, like you have to kind of aim it around it in pieces. Like it's.
Oh yeah,
it's annoying.
There's little light, glow like light sensitive paint that leads you to like treasure chests and stuff throughout the game.
You find that the lamp lady has been putting. They do actually reveal who put that, which is nice.
Yeah, Cynthia Weaver. Yeah. There is apparently a method, and so I treat the flashlight like you would treat like an aim in an action game, like in a shooter, third person shooter, which is just hold it down because you have to use the flashlight to burn away the darkness on the enemies, and it made parts of the game kind of a struggle. That said, I did a little research because I was genuinely curious because this game feels like it wants you to finish it. It feels like it wants to tell you the story. And I did not find the answer to this. And if somebody knows for sure, if you could let us know. But it felt like, at least on easy mode, that it has adaptive difficulty, which for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's when a game kind of monitors how you're doing and either makes itself harder or easier depending on how you're doing in the game itself. And there's a lot of games that have adaptive difficulty. And I legitimately feel like, at least on easy mode, that Alan Wake may have adaptive difficulty, because I would run into the same section where I just keep dying over and over again. And I change up what I was doing a little bit, but never enough. But there would be a point where instead of just barely making it or getting to a point where I was really close and then dying, I'd get to a point where I'd make it and still have like half of my resources or more left. Like starting over at the checkpoint, I wouldn't have to use hardly any bullets, flashbangs, flares, or anything like that to get to the next point. Yeah. So, but researching it, there was a lot of people commenting like, yeah, the best way to play the game is like hit the flashlight on the guys, stun them, and then shoot them. I was under the impression you had to have the light on them and then shoot repeatedly, and shoot until they died.
No, that's, I mean, because I was doing that for a while, and then because I was playing on the normal difficulty, doing it that way just like completely can completely screw you, because then you'll burn through your batteries. You burn through your batteries, and if you don't have batteries and you're just down to that last one that regenerates, you're just fucked. Yeah,
and then there's of course there's places where you need to run, and that I got, like, obviously. Another thing that feels intentional but is sort of frustrating is the accuracy of the gun. The gun feels pretty inaccurate. It kind of makes sense. Alan, once again, he's not an action hero. He's not like his character in his novels. He can shoot a gun, but he's not accurate with it. He wouldn't be accurate with it. It wouldn't make sense for him to be accurate with it. That said, sure gets frustrating as you're playing the game.
Oh yeah, no, I wholeheartedly agree there.
I will say this, as far as I'm concerned, and this is not to, because John's got some stuff to say about this, but as far as me, I had approach this game kind of in the wrong way. But in my defense, and I think John will touch on this, the game sort of presents itself as a third-person action game first.
Yeah.
And so it feels like you should approach it that way when you sit down to initially play it. And if you're stubborn like I am and also obtuse, if you're not stubborn like I am and obtuse like I am, at least with this game went, you'll catch on and make you the adjustments you need to actually play the game correctly. I didn't. I played through the whole fucking game this way, which is why there was a couple episodes that took me like 4 hours to get through. So anyway, so John.
Okay, yeah.
Your thoughts on the controls.
This is the part where I rant and rave a little bit. Okay, so the first issue, and this is a broader issue with like game design in general, particularly in horror games. Yeah, and I'm going to say I don't completely agree with your take on it, but I do in some ways. But
anyway,
it's fine. You are fully entitled to your wrong ass opinion. That's fine.
Yeah.
No, but like, I understand having like nuanced controls that reflect kind of a thing there that make things more, that can potentially make things more scary, or reflect the fact that, that like Alan Wake's an author where even though he's in better shape than I am, I know I could sprint longer than he could in the game.
Yeah.
Which is kind of infuriating.
Yeah.
But this whole idea in horror games of, oh, no, we just need to make shitty controls, and shitty controls makes it scary because it makes it more difficult or whatever. And it's like, it's the trouble I always had with the tank controls in your Silent Hills and your Resident Evils and the like the tank controls drive me nuts because it's this whole idea of, oh, we're going to make it, more like this makes it more scary because you move slowly and whatever. It's like if you need me to be able to be bad at playing the game in order for the game to be good at scaring me, then you fucked up at inception.
Yeah. I will say this brings me to an interesting point. I think one of the best horror games as far as immersion goes is a game that came out on the GameCube. It's not been re-released. It's still on the GameCube. I actually played it with our buddy Tom back in the day. He had a copy of it. It's called Eternal Darkness. Now, Eternal Darkness...
Yeah. I haven't played it, but
it has a sanity meter. It's a very cosmic horror game. And so your character, as it takes damage and encounters stuff, sort of loses its sanity. And in order to create that effect, so the player actually feels like, they're losing their grip, they can kind of relate to how the character's losing its grip, the game fucks with you. It'll do things... make the corridors and backgrounds like shaky and blurry, but it'll also go further than that. It'll have you like clip through the floor. There's spots. I shouldn't say spots because there's just moments where your sanity will reach a point where your character just clips through the floor and like you're running through the floor. It's not a glitch. It's intentional. There's one of my favorites. Is it just it puts up the blue screen of death from back in like old Windows days. It just plasts that up.
This system has
basically
crashed.
It's like you're fucked. And if you panic or if you freak out and turn it off, you're going to lose your game. But if you wait like 15 seconds, it goes back into the game itself. And for me, that's obviously, I don't feel like that's bad control. The game actually controlled okay for what it was. It didn't have...
that I'm going to say is fucking brilliant.
Yeah, it's super immersive.
That is an amazing example of immersion and also pulling the player in by having like things that are making it look like the real world is being affected by things that are happening in the game.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great way of creating immersion. But like it's a pain in the ass to turn so that the zombies can come and kill me faster than I can run down this hallway. That's what I'm talking about as bad horror immersion. That's just shitty. That is shitty design. Like if they wanted to do, frankly, if they'd made it so that it was a little more kind of, if you could hide from the shadow dudes in this one, and if they made it so you could hide from the shadow dudes and then took away the guns, except for the flare gun, and have the flare guns be more rare.
But so you just have,
and so the only thing you can do is like throw down flares and sometimes flashbangs to get away, and no other change. Yeah, like no other change there, but having an actual, honest to God, like stealth mechanic, and making it so that you can like run and bolt, and you don't have to take down everybody.
Yeah,
that would have been amazing. And then you would have to like save your flare gun ammo and your flashbangs for when you're dealing with like when you have the giant things that are being possessed.
Yeah.
Or can you imagine like trying to figure out where the attention of the giant floating, like one of those like 1,000-pound coils of wire floating around in the air, and you have to try and hide and know where it's looking?
No, and
going through? That would have been fucking amazing. Like, there was no reason for this to be a shooter. I think if it had been a little more stealth oriented,
it could have fixed.
It could have been fucking fantastic.
I think part of the problem with it is it probably comes from its open world original concept. Because I suspect that when they brought the original concept up with the open world, it was the shooter element was heavily influenced there. And one of the things that one of your and you've already kind of touched on this, but one of the things that you haven't really mentioned was the level design. There were a lot of spots in this game where you're like, you always go towards the light.
Yeah, go towards the light. Like, there's like 3 layers of trees in the way of any kind of light, and then the light that I do see, and I also got pissed where, like, this playthrough going through when I find those like big lights and stuff, like the industrial lights that have been left and you can turn on. Like, I didn't like having them there was pretty cool. Even the fact that they sort of like turned off automatically after a little bit, that also worked. The trouble is that you couldn't reposition them at all, and they were in they're in like the most useless positions.
Yeah. There was actually one spot that I had a huge problem with was it had a bunch of those lights around, and I'd run around and turn them on and then just get bombarded by the Taken. Yeah. And it'd be like, well, what the hell?
And then because that whole running fatigue happened so quickly, you couldn't even like lure the Taken to them.
No.
Because they were as fast or faster than you almost every time, except for the big ones. And then the big ones like would just appear behind you in large groups. Like there's a lot about this just completely drove me nuts. Like there were a lot of times where the combat didn't make me feel immersed. I didn't feel immersed. I didn't even feel challenged. I felt like I just walked away getting like more and more annoyed.
No, I agree with that.
Which is
I had the same feeling. There was a couple spots.
I mean, and that's not how you do that. Particularly with a game with like or the story. The story is so good. It is really compelling.
The game is worth playing through just for the story.
Kind of a head twist deal there. I've almost told people like watch a playthrough because the story is fantastic, but the gameplay is just kind of. And it's not even a shows its age thing. It's just like it's trying to do. I think it's just trying to do one too many things. There's one too many mechanics, and because of that, none of them are really refined.
I can kind of agree with that, and I will say, like, the story is amazing. Like the moment where he gets that clicker and like reads the page where Thomas Zane is writing about him before he was born. It was like, holy shit. Like Thomas Zane wrote him into existence.
Yeah. It's like apparently for a brief moment there, Thomas Zane was God.
But you know, that's the theme. That's the issue is, and perhaps I think Remedy seems to be one of those studios that kind of learns from its previous thing.
Absolutely. Like it's one of those where I don't want to, because we're going to come back to the game. I don't want to like say too much about it now, but if you compare that to Control, which has a lot of this same kind of vibe to it, where it has these like distinct Lovecraftian horror psychological elements to it. But also the gameplay is really
it's a solid game.
Like you feel empowered, like with these abilities you get and the stuff that you can do, like you feel empowered. You feel empowered and like you can make a difference, which is there. But I think part of the thing with the Alan Wake is it is neither making me feel more it's not making me feel powerful, but it's also not making me feel hopeless. And you need to do kind of one or the other.
With that.
Because if you're powerful, then you can have these moments where you know, like where that is stripped down, and you have these moments of vulnerability that you can force on the character and the player, which stand as very powerful, strong moments. There's a number of those in Control that I won't go into because you haven't played it. I haven't played
through it yet. I've only played through the first.
And this is one of those few times where this is one that game I love enough that I don't want to, you know, ruin it for anybody.
But
there's not a lot of
Remedy.
New listeners, there's not a lot of
Remedy
those.
clearly has a firm grasp on its game design and stuff, and I think they took Alan Wake and they learned from it. And from my understanding, the American Nightmare DLC has more arcadey.
It's not a DLC. It's actually its own game.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't.
Yeah, it's its own game. It was an Xbox arcade game, but you didn't have to have Alan Wake in order to buy or play American Nightmare. And it's one of those where I almost need to see if that one was made by.
I believe it was. I'm
Remedy,
pretty sure it was. I'm absolutely sure it was.
Okay, well, I'm still going to look it up. Just
okay, but anyway,
because I played through it.
But anyway, they approached that game a lot more actiony. They firmly embraced the more action type style gameplay with that than they do with Alan Wake, and but kind of concluding the gameplay section, because I mean, like I said, it does feel dated, and it does feel like there's problems with level design, with encounter design, with the way they treat fatigue and the gunplay. There's also very much some intentional decisions that were made with the game design. And I approached the game incorrectly when I played through it. But everything John has said kind of stands. Like it needs to it needs to commit to a certain style of play, which it doesn't do. It sort of wants to have it all. Yeah.
Like I said, like Alan needs to be more powerful or less or more vulnerable. Because really, like, and this is me I'm having this actual like realization about video games as storytelling, and one of the things that they can do that is very unique to them is you have that moment of like the powerful that have to be made small and then made powerful again, and that's a lot of the tropes there that happen with a lot of video games. You need that all is lost moment.
And so,
but also there's like the hopeless, like the hopeless and vulnerable, and then becomes powerful. Like, I mean, I think having having the whole thing with the clicker, it would have been amazing if even just for like a couple of fights, or like part of an episode, it had been an actual mechanic that you could use.
That's one thing that really just disappointed me, because the clicker, you quote unquote use it, but it's done in a cutscene. It's not.
Yeah, but it's a plot device. It's not actually a thing.
So as far as presentation goes, I love the initial presentation of it being a television show, which we touched on. I love it. I fucking loved it. I kind of wish we'd see more of that in video games. I don't know why, but I really liked that. As far as the graphics, even in the remastered edition, they still feel a little bit dated. It's not an ugly game. It's actually it is a little frustrating with the dark element and the flashlight, and if you get backed up into a corner or something, you lose complete visibility.
And I think it's particularly bad in like some of the outdoor.
That
areas.
said, there are moments that are absolutely gorgeous. Especially there's some of the cut scenes and some of the gameplay elements that happen during the day. It's a visually decent looking game. It is dated, and you'll notice like it has a kind of glammed up graphics from the 360 era, but it's not the graphics aren't bad, and I'm not a graphics guy anyway. I don't care that much about them. The sound design and the music is awesome. That is one thing I think is done effectively, is the sound design. When you're running around in the woods and stuff, there's a certain ambiance with the music, with the background music and the sound that sort of puts a little bit of dread as I was playing the game into it. And then the voice acting, obviously Matthew Porretta, who voiced Alan in the game, fantastic. I don't know a lot about him. I know he's a pretty successful voice actor. And he's been doing.
Oh, the guy who's the voice
Alan Wake,
for Alan Wake. Yeah, I actually looked him up. Sorry, I was looking up some stuff on the American Nightmare, and apparently I was wrong. It is, or I had thought wrong. It is considered canon, which is very interesting. Yeah. Yeah,
the guy who
it's odd, but it's not bad. It's just odd. It does develop Mr. Scratch a lot.
Yeah, the guy who voiced Alan Wake, he's been in movies. He's been in.
Oh yeah, no, he's done a lot of stuff. He's in Control. He's one of the main scientist guys, who even has this whole music video bit that you can stumble across.
He does, but he voices Alan Wake. He's been in a lot of video games, been in a lot of animated stuff. Yeah, been in a lot of television.
You know what I found out?
What's that?
You want to know? You know who I found out that he was Bill Scarlet in Robin Hood Men in Tights.
Yeah. I recognize him, his photograph. Yeah. So,
well, once I saw the picture of Rob Scarlett, I was like, well, shit, that is him. Then God damn.
The other big one is Fred Berman, who voices Barry Wheeler.
I really liked Barry. I did character.
Too. I like
that kind of the kind of friend who's like, you know what? I'm fairly certain you're crazy, but at this point, everything's fucking crazy. So, what do we do?
And one of the things, I like, and he's apparently done a lot of voices for Remedy's video games, because he did some voices for Max Payne 2.
Yeah, they grab, like they like to draw from the same well. Like if you give them good work, they'll keep hiring you.
And that makes sense. And I think a lot of studios and stuff enjoy doing the same and working with the same actors and stuff if they have good experiences. So if you're an actor, You don't need me to tell you this. Don't be a dick. Like, actually, you know what? Not even that. If you're doing anything and you want to keep doing that thing with people that are talented, doesn't matter if it's acting or whatever it is, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just in general. Just, you know what? As a general rule, don't be a dick. Things will go
one of
better
the things
for
I
you.
like about the fact, so Fred Berman, handsome man, looks, not chubby, looks like he's fit, but they clearly modeled Barry after his face. Like his facial features are, you can see the resemblance there, but they chubbed him up for Barry because Barry's a chubby guy. He's kind of schlubby.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that's just...
But yeah, so gameplay, we have its problems. Oh, and one other thing, they use a lot of...
Oh, he has done a lot of audiobooks. I assume that's exactly what you're probably good about.
Actually, no, I was moving on to music. The soundtrack is spectacular. A lot of great songs.
Oh, God, yes.
They actually have a couple of original tunes.
Everything in the Remedyverse, I would say everything in the Remedyverse, that's kind of what they're kind of doing there, because like Control has a great soundtrack as well. I think there's actually even is a Old Gods of Asgard song that shows up in Control.
Well, it makes sense.
Or actually two of them.
So the Old Gods of...
There's a Finnish janitor who makes me...
The Old Gods of Asgard, or the songs are performed by the Finnish rock group Poets of the Fall. There's two songs specifically that show up in Alan Wake 2, or not Alan Wake 2, in Alan Wake Remastered in the original game. And they've got like a YouTube channel right now with the Old Gods of Asgard. And I assume that it's probably guys from Poets of the Fall performing the songs. But I shared it with John this morning. They have this like musical recap of Alan Wake that they perform. It's bizarrely enjoyable. Like it's just delightful.
So good.
But anyway, moving on, the themes. One of the themes.
I have a quote from a comic that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do the actual quote itself and not try and read the rest of the actual comic there. This is about Alan Wake. Alan Wake is about a writer writing about another writer who is writing about himself and another fucking writer. It's like if MC Escher was a writer and also a douchebag.
Yeah. And that's...
From somebody who did not care for the game.
Who did not like the plot, especially.
Yes. That just always makes me so happy. Like, I thought of that comic immediately.
So this is one of those things where Alan Wake really touches on creation itself, and what it means to create, but also the nature of stories and the nature of how they're told. And I think it not just through the plot, through its entire presentation and everything. You'd also say Alan Wake is a video game that's presented like a TV show about writers. I mean,
yeah. And it's a writer writing about a writer who may have written that writer into existence
to finish the story of the first writer.
Yes, to finish the story that he had to destroy because he done fucked up.
This is one of those things where it's highly... I don't want to say cerebral. It's shockingly philosophical. I guess that might be the...
I'd say it's philosophical, but it's predominantly very meta.
It's very, very meta.
Because it's a story about stories.
And it's
about
it
stories.
also has that element of... It also has that strong element of cosmic horror, which
oh, absolutely.
The Remedyverse, their games are clearly taking on that edge.
Yeah. I mean, I also, it's interesting, and I'm kind of curious, and I doubt they're going to go this direction, but there's something to be said for it's almost like people assuming the dark is evil made the dark place evil.
Yeah.
and it's trying to seek power, but the only type of power it can gain from people is more evil power. Because there's something with the darkness that it, or the dark presence, that it wants to be something, and it doesn't necessarily seem to know what, but it's always been defined by others, and then sort of directing things towards granting itself the most substance, the most power.
Yeah, and it's one of those things with, because of the fear that people have, it grabs onto that negative emotion, and that's what causes it.
Yeah. It would be actually really interesting to see a perspective, like, counter story that is trying to do the same thing, but it's with the light instead of the dark.
Yeah, that would actually be kind of cool. Well, you can almost say,
I mean, the dark would be harder to like wield, but like having somebody with this power to wield shadows and is trying to fight through the light because it's gone ape shit would be very interesting.
And then another one of the ones that we wanted to touch on was history repeating itself, because
because like
Thomas Zane shows up,
I mean,
writes, causes all this crap to happen,
loses his he loses his muse. He loses his muse, tries to bring her back, and creates new problems.
And basically Alan Wake kind of does exactly the same thing, not in the same way, but
yeah. I mean, I think the difference is that he's able to actually, like, at least according to what I've seen canonically in American Nightmare and possibly in Control and Alan Wake 2, that Alice actually kind of walks away mostly unscathed, except for the fact that apparently Mr. Scratch can manifest in the real world and has been fucking with her.
Which I don't know who Mr. Scratch is, because
Mr. Scratch is the other.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah. So kind of closing thoughts. We have legacy, but we've talked about the legacy through this last section.
Yeah, we talked about all those.
Alan Wake, American Nightmare.
Keep mentioning Control. I'm not going to.
I'm not entirely sure. And if I play it, I don't know if it's still available on Xbox, anywhere on Xbox Game Store. I know it was on their arcade, but I don't know if they've ported it over, moved it over to their regular.
Oh, the American Nightmare.
I don't know if you can still.
Yeah,
I'd have to look into it. I'm curious enough to play it, so I might look into picking it up if I can find it.
I mean, it is one of those where it gives you like a time rating.
I don't give a fuck.
I know. I know what I'm saying is not because I know you're so competitive about this, but more because to set your expectations as such, that it is an Xbox arcade game, that there is some interesting lore stuff, but there's also, you're stuck in this time loop, and the way they sort of justified it being on the arcade is by having it be like, well, how quickly can you get through can you do the stuff you do to get through the time loop?
And then obviously Control, Quantum Break, which is a game they've developed between Alan Wake and Control. From my understanding, it's not actually part of the Remedyverse, but maybe it is. I don't know.
It was also something with, like, it was connected to a TV show or a web series or something. I'm
not entirely sure. The gameplay sounds interesting, and I actually kind of want to check it out, because the plot and stuff did sound kind of cool, because there's apparently some time travel elements and stuff, and I know how much you love time travel. But it sounded interesting. But as far as the legacy of Alan Wake in the Remedyverse, then there's Control, and then Alan Wake 2, which I know very little about. I've watched the release trailer, and then I watched that video that I sent you this morning, which I'll probably be sharing on the Facebook page and stuff, because it's a lot of fun. I don't know that much about it. This game's completely off my radar. I haven't seen any reviews on it. I know it's been nominated for Game of the Year. I don't know hardly anything about it, and so I feel a little out of the loop, because I'm usually pretty in tuned to new games, but it sort of falls out of my threshold for the games I normally play, and I think that's part of the issue with it. It's not something that would normally be on my radar, other than I played through the first one just now. So, anyway, closing thoughts. Do you want me to go first? Do you want to go first?
Let's you go first.
All right. So you know what the micro thoughts are, and I've kind of revealed them. The game is what it is. The controls, the frustrations with the level design, and everything are what they are. I honestly think it has an adaptive difficulty, at least on easy, because it felt to me like the game wanted me to finish it. And I got frustrated at times, but I never ended up rage quitting the game, which said something. Part of it is I felt like I could power through. Like I didn't feel like there was ever a moment of hopelessness where I wouldn't be able to get through this level. That said, there were a lot of moments where I was like, God, I just wish this would get to the next fucking cutscene so I could see what was going on with the story. And that is a credit to the game's story, but a kind of a slight against the game itself and the gameplay elements itself. The story, awesome. I love the game for that reason. I'd almost say it could be on my threshold of like top 20 games I've played, but it would only be because of the story. I may or may not replay it. Knowing what I know now and how I approached it initially and how I approached basically my entire playthrough, I might go back and revisit some of the stuff to see if I can catch some of the TV shows that I missed and some of the radio broadcasts that I missed. But it does motivate me to go back to Control and finish that and play through that. And it does make me curious, like very strongly curious about Alan Wake 2. And so it's something I'll probably be looking into getting in the near future. So yeah, I really like the game, really enjoyed the game, but it has its very frustrating moments, mostly based off its game design in controls. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it I actually wholeheartedly agree with. Like I got this, let's see, the game originally came out
2010.
in 2010.
Yeah.
2010. I probably got my copy in like 2011 or 2012. Might have even been 2013 or so, like after when I was working at the elementary school. There, so you know, like I played through it. I remember, like, for some reason it really unsettled me initially, but it unsettled me the same way that Twin Peaks unsettled me initially.
Yeah.
So along those part there.
You know what? I have a confession to make.
What?
I've never actually watched Twin Peaks.
I will say that the first season is arguably some of the best television ever made. And then the second season that they forced is hot garbage, infuriatingly hot garbage up until the very last episode. And if I didn't require Showtime or buying it, I would watch the one that was the 25 years after or whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, just a little digression.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's like that one's worth a watch. I think this game is worth a play. But the game itself, it's not, it definitely falls a little flat. I think there are cases where it's not as good as it needs to be to match up with the story. And like if it had been a TV show, and they'd done it like as Night Falls, like as a TV show about TV shows, and then had like Alan Wake sort of like woven through all of that, that would have been fucking amazing. Would have been an amazing way to tell the story. I'm not 100% convinced that this was the best medium for this story. But that being said, I do love it. I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And Remedy's a fantastic company. They do really great games. I'm looking forward to Alan Wake 2, and hell, I'm looking forward to playing through Control for the third or fourth or fifth time.
Yeah, I'm actually excited, and I'll tell the story when we actually get to do the episode on Control, and it'll probably be a little bit later in a few months before we get around to it. But I'm excited to visit Control. Like this game's actually kind of motivated me to play through that. So I'm excited to give it a whirl. And I think with that, this is our episode on Alan Wake Remastered. And that's what we got to say. Next episode will be a classic. I don't know which one we're going to do. It's actually getting pretty close to Christmas time, so we might.
Yeah. I had a thought on that, and then I forgot about it, and then I just remembered it. So we'll talk.
The one that's coming out between this episode and the one we just published, I still haven't decided, but we'll chat about it over the course of the next few days.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But with that, I think we're done. Next episode will be on One Piece live action. We will probably never do the anime because even though I like the anime, it is.
I'm not watching 900 episodes of anything.
Fun fact. It's up to almost 1,200 episodes.
Well, hey, guess what? That just makes me double down, motherfucker.
Yeah. But we're going to be doing One Piece. So come aboard. Bring along your hopes and dreams. And that's it.
Yep.
So
all right.
I'm going to go ahead and finish. Do you have anything else you want to add?
I got to do my call out.
Do you have anything else you want to add, John?
Yeah. Not before my call out.
Okay.
Unless you're referring to my call out.
I'm referring to your call out.
Not my hunky boys!
There we go. I may cut stuff up to your call out.
Relevant to Our Interests is hosted by John Belliston and Frank Shaw. Produced and edited by Frank Shaw. Theme music arranged by Frank Shaw. Scripting by John Belliston and Frank Shaw. Graphic design by Frank Shaw and Nathan Newell. You can contact us at relevanttoourinterests@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, and what used to be Twitter. John and Frank are on many other social media platforms. Hit us up. You can listen to us everywhere you listen to podcasts.